Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time, Sheridan was at the surrender of Robert E. Lee's army at Appomattox Court House, and then was sent to deal with Reconstruction in Louisiana and Texas, but was eventually assigned to deal with Native Americans in the West. Now he's promoted to Lieutenant General as Ulysses S. Grant becomes president. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. With his promotion, Sheridan now commanded the military division of the Missouri, commanding essentially all the troops from Chicago to the Rocky Mountains and from the Canadian border to Texas. His first action as the new commander was to move the headquarters from St. Louis to Chicago. Since troops and supplies were now transported by rail rather than river, the United States' railroad hub seemed like a better location for that division. The 38-year-old quickly became the hit of the city because of his sociability and fame. To better engross himself into Chicago society, he took dancing lessons. His teacher was the wife of George Pullman, the inventor of the railroad sleeping car. George himself was a classmate of Sheridan, along with the department store magnate Marshall Field and Robert Todd Lincoln. When Ulysses S. Grant went in as president, he changed the policies regarding Native Americans. It was a policy of peace and determined to treat them as wards of the government, not as separate entities. This enraged a lot of people. Sheridan had been dealing with tribes in a violent way, particularly when pursuing those groups who attacked white settlers. As lieutenant general, he did not lead campaigns anymore, he just planned them. In January 1870, Sheridan got a wake-up call when federal troops led by Eugene Baker, attacked the wrong village while chasing a rogue band of Indians in Montana. The camp was full of sick men, women, and children, mostly with smallpox. Over 50 of the dead after the attack were women and children. It was a horrible tragedy, and it horrified even supporters of Sheridan. Sheridan wasn't one to take criticism lightly, though. Although he realized that the attack was a mistake, he lashed back, writing, "During the war, did anyone hesitate to attack a village or town occupied by the enemy because women or children were within its limits? Did we cease to throw shells into Vicksburg or Atlanta because women and children were there?" A former comment made by Sheridan made it into the newspapers that threw more gas on the fire. At a meeting with Plains Indians at Fort Cobb, Sheridan told one chief that the only good Indians he ever saw were dead. The Baker massacre, as well as these comments, helped convince the public and Congress that the Indian Bureau shouldn't be transferred to the War Department from the Department of the Interior, as had previously been discussed. In 1870, Sheridan got word of war breaking out in Europe between Prussia and France. Sheridan asked for permission from William T. Sherman and Grant to go to Europe as a spectator. It was happily granted. Sheridan sailed for Europe and made his way to Berlin to meet the Queen of Prussia, but word of an imminent battle drug him away from that meeting. He rode in a hay wagon to the front, where he met Otto von Bismarck and King William I. He made a good impression on all in attendance and gained high marks for his quick eye during an engagement. At one point, Sheridan went into a nearby town, looking to get something to eat, but was surrounded by some angry Prussian soldiers, who mistook his U.S. Army uniform as a French uniform. A member of King William's party came by, saw the predicament Sheridan was in, and extricated him. Sheridan would write, "I thought my hour had come, for they could not understand English, and I could not speak German." Sheridan was given a pass from the king so he could travel anywhere without harassment. While observing the Franco-Prussian War, Sheridan got to know Bismarck very well and called him a friend by the end of his observation. They swapped hunting stories and discussed military history. While surveying a battlefield, they found some wounded men whom the stretcher-bearers had missed. Sheridan and Bismarck gave them water and stayed with them until help came. As the Prussian army moved into France, they were attacked by French guerrilla forces. Uncertain at how to handle them, Sheridan's advice was sought at a dinner party. He declared, "The proper strategy consists, in the first place, in inflicting as telling blows as possible upon the enemy's army, and then in causing the inhabitants so much suffering that they must long for peace and for their government to demand it. The people must be left with nothing but their eyes to weep with after the war." In Sheridan's personal memoirs, he mused, "I can but leave to conjecture how the Germans would have gotten along through the swamps and quicksands of northern Virginia. There is nothing to be learned here professionally, but it is a satisfaction that such is the case. There is much, however, which Europeans could learn from us. Sheridan took a grand tour of Europe while the French defended Paris, visiting Vienna and Constantinople, then Greece and Italy. In Italy, the king was an avid hunter and invited Sheridan to hunt in his royal game preserve. Sheridan had hunted in the plains and the Rockies and found the preserve very tame. He killed 4 deer from a stand within 15 paces of his position. He was urged to kill more, and he slaughtered 7 more in quick succession. He didn't feel it much sport, but tried to make his host happy. Sheridan returned to Paris to watch the Prussian army march into the city, then left to tour England and Ireland. Upon returning to the U.S., a staff surgeon and his brother had organized a hunting expedition for prominent figures of the time, including a New York financier named Leonard Jerome, the future grandfather of Winston Churchill. For entertainment and scouting, Sheridan hired his most trusted scout, the 25-year-old William Cody, soon to become Buffalo Bill Cody. 3 years before, Cody impressed Sheridan by delivering messages through Indian Territory covering 350 miles in 60 hours. The expedition went into the plains killing 600 bison and an untold amount of antelope, elk, deer, and turkeys. The success of that hunt prompted another one. President Grant wanted Sheridan to take Russia's Grand Duke Alexis, a son of Tsar Alexander II, on a hunt. Sheridan organized a cavalry escort for the Grand Duke and received reports from his subordinates by telegraph where herds of bison were. During one of these hunts, Sheridan fell from his horse. The hunting party came blazing away at the herd behind Sheridan, to the point that he had to throw himself on the ground to protect him from the flying projectiles. In between these 2 hunts, Sheridan had to deal with the Great Chicago Fire. As the fire progressed through the city, Sheridan ordered buildings intentionally destroyed to create breaks. Then, with the city decimated and tens of thousands of residents without homes, Sheridan brought in army rations for the populace. To maintain order, Sheridan's troops and local police began to patrol the streets to keep law and order. Sheridan's headquarters was destroyed, destroying with it his Civil War papers, journals, and other irreplaceable material. His home, however, was spared. It became a refuge for Army officers, including Colonel Daniel Rucker, the quartermaster general, his wife, and his daughter Irene. Back on the plains, Native Americans who did move to reservations were left to starve, being unable to survive on the land provided them. Their attempts at growing crops ran into horrible droughts that devastated the reservations. With no other choice, many left the reservations to hunt bison, as they had for hundreds of years. Sheridan supported the policy of destroying the bison herds by the military and private individuals in order to get rid of the Indian population. When Texas was debating a bill to help save the bison herds, Sheridan told them that Texas should issue all the bison hunters a medal with a dead bison on one side and a discouraged Indian on the other. He told the Texas legislators that buffalo hunters have done more in the last 2 years to settle the vexed Indian question than the entire regular army has done in the past 30 years. They are destroying the Indians' commissary, and it is a well-known fact that an army losing its base of supplies is placed at a great disadvantage. Send them powder and lead if you will, but, for the sake of lasting peace, let them kill, skin, and sell until the buffaloes are exterminated. Then your prairies can be covered with speckled cattle and the festive cowboy, who follows the hunter as a second forerunner of an advanced civilization. Sheridan didn't let international borders stop him from pursuing rogue tribes. When a group of Kickapoos crossed the Rio Grande and raided Texas villages, Sheridan wanted the group destroyed. For the illegal mission, he chose Randall McKenzie and his 4th Cavalry. McKenzie served in the Union Army during the war, fought at 2nd Manassas, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, and during Sheridan's time in the Valley. He also fought alongside Sheridan at 5 Forks in the Appomattox Campaign. He was known as Three-Fingered Jack because a Confederate artillery shell tore off 2 fingers on one of his hands. To Indians, they knew him as Bad Hand. Sheridan told McKenzie about the mission, and McKenzie was skeptical of its legality. Sheridan slammed his fist on his desk and told him not to worry about its legality. McKenzie had his full support, as well as the support of Ulysses S. Grant. In May 1873, McKenzie crossed the Rio Grande, destroyed the Kickapoo village, killing at least 19 women, children, and old men, then returned to Texas with 40 prisoners after burning the village. When Sherman found out about the raid, he told Sheridan he didn't approve. Sheridan defended his actions in a report stating, "If the Mexican authorities cannot or will not protect our citizens from the attacks of Indians and freebooters from their side of the river, then it is the duty of the Lieutenant General to see that they are so protected." McKenzie and others would be part of a major campaign designed by Sheridan to rid the Southwest of Native Americans. He planned for an all-out attack across multiple fronts, pushing the tribes west. His orders were to push the enemy to their breaking point, and they did. The climactic battle happened at a huge canyon, Palo Duro. The U.S. Army destroyed lodges, killed numerous warriors, and captured 1,500 ponies. The Army chose the best 350 and shot the rest. McKenzie and the others pushed west, and by early 1875, hundreds of Native Americans began surrendering to various military installations. Sheridan's 1874 campaign had worked brilliantly. At the end of 1874, the Secretary of War, William Belknap, ordered Sheridan to New Orleans, Louisiana to remove 5 Democrats from the State House of Representatives who filled 5 disputed seats. Sheridan entered the city and with fixed bayonets removed the 5 Democrats. His return to New Orleans was met with hatred and hostility. At breakfast in his hotel, other guests would underline derogatory statements about Sheridan in newspapers and send them by a waiter to the general. Sheridan would read it, smile, and nod at the sender, not letting the words bother him. In June 1875, Sheridan's life changed. He got married. The bride was Irene Rucker, the daughter of the Army officer whom Sheridan let stay at his home following the Chicago fire. They began a courtship a few years after she and her family had stayed at his home, and by 1875, Sheridan asked her to marry him. Sheridan was 44, while Irene was 19. They were married in Chicago at the Rucker home in a private ceremony. Gold was found in the Black Hills of what is now South Dakota, on sacred land to the Sioux. Sheridan and the rest of the Army High Command decided not to stop prospectors from invading the Sioux lands, and it became open for white settlement. The Great Sioux War erupted on the northern Great Plains, and Sheridan hoped to deal with those tribes who banded together the same way he dealt with the ones in the southern plains, pushing them to the point of exhaustion. His army was to converge on the bands from the south, east, and west, delivering devastating attacks that would knock them into submission. It was July 4th in Philadelphia, and the city hosted the Centennial International Exposition. Both General Sherman and Sheridan enjoyed the festivities, but later that day a message came for Sheridan and Sherman. It reported Custer's 7th Cavalry had been wiped out. The news devastated Sheridan, who had come to depend on Custer for so many of his operations. Sheridan wrote, "Poor Custer, he was the embodiment of gallantry, but I was always fearful that he would catch it if allowed a separate command. He was too impetuous, without deliberation. He thought himself invincible, and having a charmed life. When I think of the many brave fellows who went down with him that day, it is sickening."